Hello folks, we're looking at analysis of variance. So we're going to go through real quick and show you how to set up Excel to do the calculations for you. For those of you in my class, this is actually going to correspond to an example out of our textbook. What we're dealing with right now is three groups. In this case, we have preschoolers, and we have tests of their language apprehension. And each of these groups, there's 10 members, and group 1 spends, I think, 5 hours a week in class. Group 2 is 10 hours a week in preschool. Group 3 is 10 or more hours a week, and they have various test scores. And the theory is, the hypothesis is, more time in preschool amounts to better learning of language. So we have the test scores to prove it. So we're going to do analysis of variance because we're dealing with three groups, not just two, and so that we have now tools to deal with three or more groups and to test hypotheses. So we're going to need to set up our computer, set up Excel. I'm in actually Excel 2010, should work the same in Excel 2013. Go to your File menu. We're going to make sure that we have the proper add-ins to be able to do this calculation. So under File menu, click on Options. We now want to click on the left-hand menu and click on Add-ins. This will show you a current list of available add-ins that come stock with Excel, and then what add-ins are active or installed on your computer. What we have here, you're looking for Analysis Toolpack. It's probably going to show up in this inactive application data. Highlight it. Go down here at the bottom and click Go. Once you have it highlighted, it's going to bring you to another menu called Add-ins. Make sure that it's checked. You also want to check Solver Add-in because that's actually the engine that does the math for you. With those two checked, click OK, and you should be good to go. Your computer may do a little thinking, but chances are you should be good to go once you do that. So on the top ribbon here now we have these three sets of data that are highlighted. Going to go to the Data menu. Over on the far right, we have Data Analysis. And you're going to choose, then we're going to choose Anova, which stands for Analysis of Variance, Single Factor. Because we're simply dealing with these ratios. We're not splitting boys and girls. We're just looking at three groups of students. We could have actually 6 different scenarios if you wanted to do a two-factor. But we're just dealing with single factor. Click OK. We're now going to go to a macro screen that's going to enable us to set this up. So instead of us going through the calculations and doing the between groups mean sum of squares and the within groups mean sum of squares so we can do our math for our F statistic, we're going to have the computer actually do it for us. So with that clicking and blinking on it off and on, you want to highlight one of the cells in your data group. Left-click your mouse, and then just draw a little box around it. And voila, Excel is now looking at all of the data in these cells. You want to check, in this case, because I labeled these Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3, you'll see why in a second. We can actually look at each of these separate groups. Labels in first row, which just basically tells Excel, these are text, don't do any math on these. So we don't get an error message, and it does the math on then these 3 columns below it. Alpha is set to 0.05, which is just the probability of making a type 1 error, as we've learned before, and that just tells us, how sure do we want to be that these groups are different. 95% sure, 99% sure, and so that's how we set our alpha. Output range. We don't want it on a new worksheet. We actually want it on the same screen, so we can look at it together. Click in this box to get the cursor blinking again, and all we're going to do is come over here to where it's clean. We don't have any data, and that tells us where to put the table so we can look at this stuff once it's done the math for us. So all these look good, so be sure to highlight your area. Labels in first row, it's not going to do the math on those. Set your alpha, in our case 0.05. Where do you want the table to go? Click OK, and it does the math for us. Now this table looks a whole lot like what you're going to see in your book. we have all three groups, group 1, group 2, group 3. Now that we have the data here, we can name these whatever we want. So, it could be our 10 a.m. group. I don't know if I highlighted it there. But, we can do whatever we want to this to make it stand out. We can change color, make bold. We can change these to percents if we'd like to do that. The important thing to know is that this sees our data. In this case, we have three groups, 1, 2, and 3. So degrees of freedom for between groups, we have three groups. So degrees of freedom in this case is 2 because it's k minus 1. Within groups, we have 30 students we've looked at. So number of groups is 3. So 30 minus 3, in this case 27. So 2 over 27. And our F statistic, it calculated it for us. It did the division of the between groups, mean sum of squares, and the within groups, mean sum of squares, and came up with a ratio then of 8.799 and some change. This actually carried more decimals than your textbook did. And if you'll notice here, it tells us that the p-value of these three groups, there definitely was a difference, in this case, with test scores from each of the three groups. And so because that was our criteria, we can say then, well, time in class then, at least in this example, equates to higher test scores. And this F score is way off the chart because we're dealing with now a 1/10 of 1% probability. So this is definitely proof that this is what happened. And in this case, our criteria at 0.05 would have been an F score of 3.35. So we can say 8.799 is way off the charts. All we needed was a 3.35 to be able to reject our null, and the null being that there is no difference in these groups. But we can reject the null, and in this case we can say, at least by this example, that time in class equates to higher test scores for these preschoolers. So that's how this works. Please get in touch with me if you have any questions, but our homework's going to be related to this. You're going to be doing this with a data set this week, so get in touch with me.